am wondering if it's actually, there's a role of the mind to play in it. And it's the intention, because yeah, there can be like the tapping to like make the feeling dissipate, to fix it. But then there's also the tapping to just signal, I'm with you. I'm with myself in this experience. And I've found myself, because obviously I'm doing breath work like all the damn time, especially right now. But I found myself going into it of like, oh, I have so much tension. I'm so uncomfortable. And then at some point in the process, I'm like, okay, wait, I'm trying to make this feeling go away. And that's not what I need. Let me make that slight mental shift of like, I'm here, I'm with myself. And yeah, it just ends up, the ground, especially with grounding touch, ends up just kind of allowing that surrender to the experience. And then ironically, of course, it dissipates.
Yeah.
Fairly quickly after.
The grounding touch, I mean, getting out of the head and into the body is like the only way, I mean, to actually fix these things. You know, even when we say we have our nervous system, right? When you go in and you're like, hey, let me feel into my nervous system. Like, I don't know about you, but I feel into like my spine and all the little tentacles. And then like, I'm like, what's here? And then, but someone reframed it for me, like feeling into your sensory system. And that was just such a different experience for me to be like, rather than like, what state is my nervous system in? I'm like looking for the nervousness, the activation, the stress. But then it's like, oh, okay, well, if I feel in to my sensory system, oh, the temperature of the air is really nice. And like, there's a lot of ease, and I can hear the birds outside. And it was just such a different experience to like, check into my body. And it was just so beautiful, just that simple shift in the framing of how I approach it.
I love that so much. That's been a huge or a significant learning that I've had from the breathwork container I've been in, of when we are more regulated, we have basically a widened aperture of our senses and we can take in more. And I think that's when we also can perceive more synchronicities and otherwise feel into our own intuition. And then when we're dysregulated or feeling a threat, we like hone in on that threat, and it acts as a blinder of everything, or blinds us from seeing everything around it. And then it perpetuates it because all we're seeing is a threat.
Let's just also name that we're built that way. Like our biology is built that way. So we're constantly scanning for threats. It's just a constant thing. Stephen Porges and Deb Dana do all of this work of like even just showing images. There was and it's like, okay, here is a flower, a dandelion growing out of like really dry earth. And like my system got really tight at that. And then the next picture was like a baby and you soften. So it's like we're constantly, our body is reacting to everything in our view. And we're constantly taking in all this information. And we're made to be that way. But yeah, widening that window of tolerance is what allows us to bounce back more quickly. You know, we're constantly going through our edges and limits. We're in that like activation, deactivation throughout the day, but it's depending on what our own personal window of tolerance is. So working to expand that allows us to have more things and stay within kind of that connected state. And then when we go outside, that's when we disassociate and fragment in some way. And so it's widening that level of safety within ourselves, but also starting to notice, like we were just kind of talking about that, like, okay, that wave, okay, how can I receive that? Am I clenching down? Because that's what causes really, like, actually it's tightening my window of tolerance.
Yeah, I have so many thoughts and feelings on that. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the window of tolerance. I'll be asking about that later because it's helped me kind of see that when I am going outside of my current window of tolerance and it's like feels unbearable and like it's never going to end, it's actually an opportunity. That's the exact opportunity to widen that window of tolerance so that I can hold more, I can hold more range and still be connected to myself and connected to safety.
So I want to just clarify like one thing in that is so many of us are constantly trying to push to like, the first thing is to create this safety, right? So if this is our safety, how do we create this level of safety for within ourselves without shame? The thing is like everyone's like, well, we should, right? And so we need to develop and respect and love our own window of tolerance. And once we build and start to like find safety within that, that's when we go, okay, well, let me like give it just a little bit more. And then it's not like because otherwise we blow out our system. So it's really finding that. And, a huge thing for creating that window of tolerance, this is like one of the number one things I really work on with my clients, I find, is like boundaries. And because boundaries are the way that we so lovingly create safety for ourselves. But so many people, we've been shamed in creating boundaries, and we think it's like, and then it's like, well, you put up a wall or you did this. A wall is when you're coming from a triggered state and you're outside of your window of tolerance. And really, that's when you're creating distance between one another. But a boundary, when done in a healthy state, is so beautiful. And it is truly done so that you can create that safety within self. Saying no to someone when it feels like an authentic no is essential for your safety. And when you say yes, you're actually teaching yourself that you can't trust yourself. You're going to push yourself outside of it. So you are no longer safe because you're not taking care of yourself.
You're subjecting yourself to uncertainty because you're giving your agency to other people, and then you're subjecting like how you're affected to whatever they decide versus creating that inner stability through boundaries.
Yeah. You're often putting someone else's comfort before your own because you don't want them to be uncomfortable. So now you're sitting with discomfort, but then you're also telling yourself that you're not safe. Like you aren't going to take care of yourself in this scenario. And it's like death by 1,000 cuts, right? Like you might just be like, well, I went to the party. I really don't want to, but my friend wanted me and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, but what would have been better? Would it have been better to stay in and like hold your no and then rest so that you can show up better the next day in the way that you wanted to? So it's like all these little micro breaks that, we have with ourselves. And I think specifically with women, we're so taught to be polite and be kind and like, no, so it's really, I think, so important for us to start to rethink what boundaries are as a way of actually showing self-love. Because once we know that we can trust ourselves, that window of tolerance just naturally starts to widen a little bit. And then we get to trust ourselves a little bit more because I'm going to use my voice to take care of myself. And I'm not going to worry, about this other person necessarily. I'm going to do it with love and compassion. It's not going to be cruel, but I'm also going to know that I need to lovingly take care of myself.
Yeah, I was amused when you started talking about the window of tolerance, or rather speaking to the importance of stabilizing within wherever our window of tolerance currently is, because I think it reflected to me, oh, this is like my masculine overachiever part that's like, no, let's just expand as quickly as possible.
Yeah, you're like, when I'm triggered, that's an opportunity to expand. I go, the opportunity is to stay right there and name, oh, I'm at my edge. What do I need to nourish myself? Oh, I feel I'm at my edge. Oh, I feel I'm a little bit past. It's not blow past it. It's how can I stand here and like respect I'm at my edge? What do I need to take care of myself? Do I need to pause this conversation because there's too much information coming at me? And, say, I'm so sorry. Can we please pause? I felt triggered and I'm actually no longer able to hear what's going on. Can we just slow this down? And like so many of us are like, oh my God, I could never do that. But now, like, I'm actually setting that loving boundary in that moment. I'm pausing, I'm taking care of myself so that I can be in connection with others. And it's not to run away. If I, potentially if I stayed in that conversation, that triggered state, I might lash out. I might put up that wall. I might, now have resentment because I stayed throughout this thing and they just kept going and they didn't see. And it's like, well, of course, I have to state my own boundary or my need in this moment. And so what is that? And it might just be to slow down or take a pause.
Totally. And enough of those cuts, I mean, it's like you said, death by 1,000 cuts, but it just compounds into, I mean, really what feels like a mess, like me coming out of something that's like really just that, like little moments of not naming my needs to myself first and then to others. And then I think that's where people can get lost in themselves and then end up in a situation of like, how did I even end up here? This is like so not aligned. And it takes that precision of awareness in the moment and that like really radical self-honesty. And that's where like everything to do with somatics, I think, comes into play of like actually being able to be in relationship to your body and sense what's happening and in your body, and then use your mind to kind of make sense of that and then come to clarity of what you need to maintain like safety in your system. Well, on that note, let's get started. Cat Boyko, welcome to Rich Souls. Yay! Hi! I'm so happy that we're finally having this conversation. It feels like it's been a long one in the making, and I'm just so glad that it's here and to dive into more about you, more about your work, and also the very important intelligence that is somatics.
Thank you for having me. I'm so thrilled to be here. And yes, it has been a bit in the making. So,
all right. Well, I want to first give anybody who doesn't already know you a sense of your background, because I feel like it's so relevant to the work that you do now. But let's first start with that. What is the work that you do now?
So I am a somatic and embodiment coach for women. My specialty is really focused on women in leadership, or that type A overachiever, gold star winning, go, 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 because I was her. So I really love working with those women.
I have a feeling, because I'm also her, and I have a feeling that a lot of my listeners are also her and can resonate. Okay, can you recap your career arc?
Yeah, I've had a pretty interesting career. I am a 3-5 in my human design, so I'm the great experimenter, and it definitely has applied to my life. I studied musical theater from the time I was 7 to 18 years old, or actually like 19. I went to Performing Arts High School in New York City, and then I followed that to Northwestern. And after that, I realized I wanted to switch things up that as I got towards the real world. So I transferred to Parsons and I became a fashion designer. And I had a 10-year career in fashion design. I then had a 2-year career as having a startup, which was for online dating. And then I went into advertising, and I was a producer in advertising for at McCann Erickson for some of the world's largest brands for another 10 years. So I've switched things up, and now I am a somatic coach for women.
Are you a manifesting generator?
No, I'm a manifester and have been deeply working against my design for a long time.
Okay. Well, I didn't realize that you had that whole background in fashion and with your startup. I just know your career history as being at the advertising agency because it was such a long period of time.
Yeah, no, I've lived many lives, and, it's essentially I use this skill a lot with my clients because so many people are afraid for transition. And I've transitioned essentially every single decade of my life into something else. And my theory has always been, well, what if it stays the same? I know what this life looks like and this trajectory. And if I'm not in love with it at this point of where I get to go next, then I have to change. There's not even an option for me. I have to find the thing that my soul is drawn to. And, this is for all the single ladies out there, this is one of the beautiful things of that, of being I'm now 42 years old and haven't had children yet. And And it's allowed me to change careers and be curious and really chase my dreams, because if I'm not happy, then what is there? Right? So I've gotten to seek out these things at a beautiful and wildly free and abundant level.
I love that. Like permissioning women to embrace the single season and the freedom that it affords us to be able to pivot, because I mean, obviously we don't have those like attachments that would keep us from pursuing our dreams. And then also just having the space to even sense into what those dreams are and the time to devote to the experiments.
Absolutely. It's been, I think I spent a very long time and a lot of time sad because I didn't have the things that others had. And I didn't have the children. I bought a house in New York. I bought an apartment, and I got there and I did the things that I could. And I was really miserable in it. My house became one of my biggest anchors. And after going through a big breakup, I got to really look at my life, and I had to grieve the life that I thought I wanted really deeply. I had to grieve, like, I may never have children. I may, never find partnership. And in actually letting that dream go, I got to start to imagine a new dream. And it was within that I found joy. When I stopped holding on to this vision that I couldn't control. I couldn't control when I met the person. I couldn't control, so many other things, that I liberated myself by letting that dream go so that I could go and find myself.
Okay. How did you tangibly let that go?
I think it was really getting clear on what else is possible. The very first thing that I do with so many of my clients is vision. If we don't have a North Star and know where we're going, then we don't know what to say yes to, and we don't know what to say no to. It helps us create okay, I'm going to take this next step. And so it's really bringing my clients and creating a safe space, because when we try to do this on our own, so often it's like your subconscious mind comes in and is like, nope, you can't have that. Nope, that's not possible. And so having a safe space for someone to challenge you and continually bring you back and really get to the heart of what it is that you want, that then it's like, okay, we are here and this is what we're going for. And everything else is just noise. So what is the next actionable step? It might be the biggest, scariest thing of blowing up your entire life. But if you're not happy with where you are, why do you keep going down that road? Everything is solvable. Everything is solvable. So getting into vision is the first thing. And then it's okay, well, that opens me up to possibilities. I was I can't sit here anymore in this depressed state and this sad state, longing for this life that I can't control. So what else is available to me? And I was okay, well, I love travel. Travel nourishes me. So I sold my apartment and went nomadic for 9 months, went on adventures, met new people, found different community, and really found myself, and found that I had to go against a lot of status quo in things, where it was my old identity. I was in Costa Rica and a friend was there from New York, and she wanted to go out to the bars, and I had stopped drinking a year before, and I was that doesn't sound fun to me. I was this ecstatic dance thing sounds fun, and her other friend were that's weird. And I had to it was the beginning of my journey, and I was I really don't want to go to a bar. That doesn't sound fun to me. But ecstatic dance would nourish my soul. And it was that moment taught me something so much of just keep following my heart, keep following my joy, and to start to let go of what the thing that I should do, and just really start to cultivate what brings me joy, and to try things and, keep what works and forget the rest.
I love that. I think that guidance does truly ground how to essentially tap into possibility when you feel stuck in your current circumstances, is to just pull the thread and like, what do you actually enjoy? And then just go do that even once and then see what comes up next, and then just keep pulling the thread.
Yeah. Because the thing is like sometimes, we get into a spiral, and then the next question, like I'll have my story, my shame spiral, right? That thing that keeps going. And then once I feel complete on that, if I can recognize I'm in that spiral, I get to go, okay, well, what else is possible? Because that's just one version. And if we look at something as 360, like it's like if I tilt just 1 degree from right here, it feels like nothing, but wait, that's an entirely different reality. And another degree and another degree. So it's like, if I wanted to, I can come up with 360 different options for it. So starting to think, okay, well, what else is available? What else are other options is so essential to invite all of that in.
And how do we do that, right? I feel like it is somatics. It is creating safety in our systems, in part to be able to, just like we were talking about at the start of our call, of feeling safe enough to expand our purview of the circumstances of our life and to sense into those possibilities versus being narrowed in on what we perceive as a threat.
Yeah, it's really, so somatic work has become the differentiator for me. I did probably 15 years of traditional cognitive behavioral therapy. And I really found, while definitely I'm like not bashing any, like, God bless all the therapists, and like, please everyone do what is best for you. And it is super supportive, but just talking about something from a somatic lens keeps you in the spin. And when you think of it, where do you feel your feelings? They're felt. They're in the body. So we're trying to solve something that is a felt sense with our brains. And so when we come back to the body, we start to actually notice these contractions and these things that are going on. And now it's a little cue. So as we were talking about, when I feel overwhelm in my nervous system, I call it locked down when I'm in sympathetic.
Yeah.
And fight or flight. So I call it locked down. And like, I can be also locked onto something. Like if I'm like in my doership, it's like locked down and locked on. But I can feel that in my body. So I can go offline, right? I can go offline and just get stuck in the doing. But when I start to come online, if I take a moment and check in with my body, which I now have learned to do regularly, I can feel that and go, oh, I'm locked on. Okay. All right. Is it needed in this moment? I'm safe. I'm fine. And so having the body awareness, we can actually address these things. And as my teachers taught me, I think it was Professor Scott Lyons or Dr. Scott Lyons that told me this, is the body tells the truth, but it also lies, because we've learned most of this. We call them conditioned tendencies in the body, these like habits, these patterns that we have. We learned them probably in childhood. And so our body keeps responding to threats. This is why like attachment patterns and behaviors tend to be the same, because it's how we've been trained to respond. The fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And fawn is a learned behavior. And so do we respond to it because that is part of how we learn to soothe ourselves or take care of ourselves, to stay safe in these moments. So we get to, by bringing in that body awareness, I can be like, oh, this thing is activating is it true? Am I safe right now? And then I get to start to repattern and bring in this awareness. Oh, wait, I'm really locked down. Okay, everything's fine. I don't need to rush this. I can find some safety in my body. I can get out and go for a walk for 1 minute around the block and come back and approach this in a different way that I now get to choose into. So that's what I love about somatic work. It's really, it's that alarm. It's what allows me to get back into flow and understand my window of tolerance. It's a physical understanding of my window of tolerance now, and how it gives me choice of how I want to show up in the world, because it's telling me what's really going on underneath.
Yes. Okay. I want to go into how somatics play into femininity. Femininity is like a polarity, and for women, because they are inextricably linked. And ever since I learned about the link and started to connect more to my body in different ways, I have been able to tap into like this feminine force that allows me to be more receptive to life and also to creativity, and to start to form a partnership between my inner masculine and feminine to be able to actually create things. And I just think it's such a huge hack that, thank goodness, is getting more of the spotlight lately. But I feel like there's still so much to go in this area. And I know you have personal experience in this work. So can you speak to the link between somatics and femininity?
Yeah, I think the link between somatics and femininity is just so beautiful. I learned about sexual polarity and embodiment from a gentleman named John Wineland. And he talks about the masculine and feminine in each of us. And so we all have this. And, you know, the masculine, he says, is like a mountain. It's grounded, steady, stable. It's also like that decisive action doing. It's like linear. But the feminine is like a blade of grass blowing in the wind. And the gift of the feminine is to feel and to amplify that. And so the feminine gets to just kind of follow what is happening and going. It's creativity, it's flow, it's artistic, it's life force. And the more that I've connected with my body in the somatic world, it's actually the opposite. I first connected with my body through feminine embodiment work. And that's what helped me to really understand how much I had been living in my masculine. I will say my therapist about 15 years ago had been like, you've got a lot of masculine energy. We need to balance you out. And he was like, it's like a yin yang symbol. We got to find that balance. And I didn't understand at the time what he meant. But it was that comment that actually, when I heard John describe the energies, I was like, okay, I want to work with him. And it was his programs. I was that executive producer in New York City. I created structure. I did all the doing. I was a one-woman show. I led large teams. I ran millions of dollars at a time. And so with that, I was so firmly in my masculine. And the work that I now really love to do is to bring in that feminine energy and that flow and that connection to be able to feel and attune to others. And I really think it's like, when we are in our masculine doing, which is what the world praises right now, it is what we all get rewarded for, we get paid for, it clamps down so much of the feminine life force energy.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Right? And it's like it's almost like I was living in black and white and now I see in color. That's what having access to my feminine energy has brought in. And creating safety for her has been really beautiful, but also having to learn that, my feminine, I get to define in any way. I had judgment. I had judgment around the feminine. The light, airy, like soft feminine, the damsel, like I had a lot of judgment around that. And that was me and like that was my protective self. And so I charged through, I did all the doing, and so I think that access to the feminine is so essential. And a part of my work is helping women in leadership to find that and bring that more, because the masculine world that we have stepped into, right? The feminist movement brought women into the workplace, but not as women. It was women proving that we could do the work just like men. And so it wasn't brought in with this model of how we all function. Even our energy levels aren't. Men are on a 24-hour clock and women are on a 28-day cycle, and it changes throughout our lives. And so there's no compassion. There's very little empathy. In order to have that understanding, we unfortunately have to then go work in all female environments. And I don't think that is healthy fully either. So how do I think we're at a really beautiful time where we get to redefine what leadership can be and bring in the feminine into that. And especially in the age of AI right now, where everyone is so scared and we're doing more and more on Zoom and we're coming into connection less and less, we actually need to make more of an effort to come into connection with one another as human beings. And so that's where I think the feminine in leadership, where you get to actually like tune in and feel into your team, is what's going to like start to raise the joy of people at work again. Because I don't know many people that are working, a more traditional corporate job that are doing it in a joyful way. And I think that comes down from leadership. We get to create these environments. And I do think that women, when we find actually that balance within ourselves, we still get to have our grounded masculine doing structure, but we also get to bring in that safety, connection, attunement, and that felt sense. And those together, it's not just masculine versus feminine, those together in a really beautiful, balanced way, it's so magical. We need both.
Wow, you said so much. I couldn't even pull the thread on. No, like an amazing.
I'm sorry,
way.
I ramble.
No, you're great. It's
I'm long-winded. I'm sorry.
I want to pull because let's see, where do I start? I mean, I don't know if I want to go down this rabbit hole, but of the conditioning specifically in women to appease others, aka to be in a chronic fawn response, and how that disconnection to self and hyper attunement to others is actually linked to even disease, right? Like autoimmune conditions is absolutely nuts. And I've heard that being talked about, that link being talked about more and more often. And I'm so glad, because I feel like even 5 years ago, that was considered like kind of like a woo woo or just like unrelated concept. But yeah, I think, again, it's amazing that it's being named now so that women can see the systems that they've been operating in and how they've been contributing to it, and therefore take our power back in actually having agency and claiming our feminine in the workplace and in our relationships, so that we can foster connection. And then the other thing that came to mind was just like for business, it's like talked about like it's so sterile and just numbers. But in my mind, I'm like, business is just a series of relationships.
It is. But business is just a series of relationships. But we're still, at least the way that I follow them, was still a very masculine, like from the 1950s, like Mad Men. I worked in advertising. It like hadn't changed much. Boozy lunches, parties, like just insane. Traveling the world, jetting off to these places, working with celebrities. And it was fun, But I also often was the only woman in a room. And, and it was very much this like, have to keep going, have to keep doing. And I will say that some of the worst leaders I've had were women. My observation, and I've worked at large companies, small companies. I worked at Anthropologie as a designer for many years, and that was all women. And like, so I've gotten to like be in all female environments and mostly male environments. I've gotten to be in mixed environments, small, like, 3 employees, startups to large 1,000 people corporations. So I've really gotten to see and run like such an expanse. And I've had great leaders and I've had terrible leaders on both men and women. But the worst ones I've found have been women. And that's what I would like to change, because the leadership that I had was either very insecure and trying to prove that they could do the job just like the men because they were the only woman in senior leadership, or they were the appeaser and like the team mother. And so they would just be like, okay, honey. And like, something comes up with a client and they just literally like step back and are scared and are like, she has something to say. And you're like, it's really your job to be prepping the client for the $10,000 of overages we're about to have. And I can bring in why, but it's not my role. That's where we need to be finding our own groove and more female leaders, because also what I really find out there is that like I truly haven't seen amazing feminine leadership myself. That's not true. I've had 1 or 2 examples of really beautiful female leaders. And that out of working for 20 years in various corporate situations with probably, 15 bosses.
Yeah.
That's pretty small.
But then it's like, can we blame those women, especially in previous generations, because they were indoctrinated into a system that was built for men and did set the standard of success and effectiveness as, as exhibiting male traits, and at the expense then of their femininity, suppressing femininity, which I think is how like kind of shadow elements of the feminine can then come out in the workplace.
No, we can't. We absolutely cannot. Like, it's like we have been fighting and we're still fighting, right, for a seat at the table. I mean, women, I think, still make like 76 cents on the dollar for what men make, so it's like, we're still not there. And I think it's like 20 something CEOs of the Fortune 500 are women, but it's been proven that women have more empathy and compassion, and like people tend to be happier in those work environments. But it's also thought that women aren't going to be as ruthless when it comes to those numbers. And so it's this element of hitting these numbers, corporate greed, right? Which just feels like, I hate having to say that, but I also feel that we're in this place as a country that's even more and more divisive, because it's like there's only this element of achievement and success that we're trying to get to, whereas we're missing like the people. We're missing the connection. And so, that's really my dream, my vision, is that we empower more women to be in spaces of leadership, but also to be bringing that beautiful balance of their feminine and also their masculine to it, because we need to be able to make the hard decisions and stand in that as a leader. But the more we can also see people for who they are and make them feel seen, safe, and supported, the happier everyone in these offices and in these environments are going to be. And that, I think, just makes the world better. I mean, could you imagine coming home and being like, I had a great day and I'm not burnt out. I'm not overwhelmed. I have the right amount of workload because my boss sees me and respects me and saw that I needed support. And so they went out and found some support. And now I feel capable to actually do the job. I don't know anyone who would say that.
Yeah. I would say that with one of my clients. I'm so fortunate. I think, it is happening and it's happening slowly, but after being I also was at an agency I was there for almost 8 years, and it was in government, and therefore it was just like so masculine, and it was very much a system in which I operated from my masculine, and where my distorted feminine came out. Even though I was like trying to be so self-aware and trying to connect to my teammates and leadership and clients, it still came out sideways because I was still developing the muscle and of firstly integrating my masculine and feminine, and also like naming my needs and boundaries. And it's the process with that of especially coming from chronic fawn, where it's like often we can swing to the other end of the pendulum into like a distorted fight. And really we have to come to a balance. But yeah, I had an experience with a client recently where I like went back and watched the video recording and I thought I looked fine, but she was attuned to me to be able to sense that I was dysregulated in the moment. And she just straight up asked like, are you okay? And she invited me to like pivot the meeting and like take the day off, take the week off, and like get back to her later. And it was just such a beautiful example of what you're describing, of empowered femininity in the workforce, and that it doesn't have to impact productivity, or not even productivity, but I would say like effectiveness, because I still did what I needed to do and probably like surpassed what I was even going to be capable of doing in that moment. And now I feel that safety of like, okay, now I have this counterpart who sees me as a human and not just a cog in the machine. And that is possible. And how it's possible in just this like one micro moment. And it's just, more of those moments happening, more people putting that into practice. And that is really how the change happens. And I think your mission is so beautiful because it is necessary. And like what beauty and power there is in a woman who is in touch with her masculine and can make shit happen in the 3D, but is also tapped into herself first and also able to selectively or strategically attune to other people as well while staying connected to self.
Yeah, that's, I have a 12-week program called the Embodied Boss, and the first 9 weeks are understanding your own nervous system. And so we only just started this past week in like, okay, now how do we do that out? Because that's the biggest thing. How do I know my own patterns? How am I showing up? Because just as you just said, you thought you were fine, but you're actually activated and your body is now transmitting this activation. And when you're in leadership, everyone is looking to you to go, are we safe? Are we okay? Okay. Right. But if you're not, like I never understood energy before I started doing this work. And it's like, no, I'm a highly sensitive and attuned person, and I always have been. And I just didn't know how to name it before. And so because I was so attuned, I was in lockdown. And then because I was in a very high stakes role, I was constantly in activation. And so I couldn't be in connection with my team. I wanted to be. Like that was the thing, is I sat there longingly wanting to be. I wanted to be like the person that was playing with the team. I wanted to be the person that got to, show up and I wanted the productions to be fun. I mean, we got to travel all over the world and work with really cool directors and photographers and sometimes celebrities. Like we got to do really cool things, but my anxiety levels were so high trying to contain and control all of it and manage all of it. And I didn't know how to regulate or receive support, or even like I thought if I asked for support, I would be failing, So it was a very hard time, if I had had the tools then that I had now, I could show up and play with my team. I could show up and like notice what was going on and help them regulate. I would actually start every meeting, which I do with most of my clients and things now, by doing 1 minute of breath and just being like, okay, we're just going to ground. We're all coming from all these things. How can we come back to our body so that we can all be present rather than like the doing and the things and the tech and all of it? Having that ability, like, to attune, to connect, to see people for who they are, because that's what life is really all about. You know, my father always said, the job doesn't love you back. And I think that was a really hard lesson for him because he was very successful and he sacrificed a lot. And at the end of the day, he was like, it doesn't love you back. And so that's been a lesson for me of really coming into life is right now. And that's what somatics does. When we come into the body, we're in the present moment. When we're in our thoughts, we're in the past or the future. So by constantly coming back to my body, oh, what's available to me right now? That is what has brought in joy for me. That's how I can now access joy. Oh, wait, right here in front of me. Oh my gosh, I'm sitting with Saara. This is amazing. Like, it's like, so this is happening right now. How beautiful.
Yeah. And there can be a huge learning curve in operating counter to that for so much of our lives.
Yeah.
But the journey is so worth it. And it actually can happen quite, at least for me, it seems to happen quite quickly. And it's just a process, of course, just like with anything. But I think just being willing to try things like somatic coaching or polarity work, or even just sitting out in nature for 10 minutes and undistracted and just like allowing yourself to feel the temperature of the air, the sun on your skin, the grass beneath you, the light and shadows and texture of the leaves of a tree, just doing that. It's so accessible to us, but it does take the conscious choice to drop out of our minds and to actually see what's in front of us. And that's where the nervous system education and into like implementation of what we learn through that work through somatics is like so significant. Because I mean, I call a lot of things into shit with like my practices, but so much of it really is about that like attunement to self, and then being able to sometimes use tools, but otherwise just sense into what my system needs at a given moment so that I can actually be in control of my experience. And sometimes the word control is interesting there because sometimes you're not in control. You're just kind of like present with what is. But
we've been trained not to slow down. We are so deeply conditioned to like, ooh, what's next? What's next? The moment you're bored, oh, let me reach for my phone. Oh, let me turn on the TV. It's instant entertainment. And I don't know anyone that's like, how can I do this slower? Right? Everyone at work is like, okay, I need it faster. I need it faster. And so as you're saying, like going out into nature for 10 minutes, so many people are uncomfortable with the concept of slowing down. And I had that discomfort when I left advertising, and that idea of slowing down, first off, my body forced me to. Like literally I had to sit in a dark room for a solid like month and a half. The most I could watch was like Downton Abbey and Bridgerton. I needed period dramas that literally were so easy to my system. Could not do anything else. And so I really needed, and I still say that I'm recovering from burnout. It is a constant, it is a thing in my system. But that ability to slow down is essential because we need that recovery, but not what so many of us are doing is numbing with TV or alcohol or cigarettes or pot. And like so many people are just numbing to disassociate because they're so exhausted. But what we need, it's not restorative. It's not nourishing. What we actually need is that time to be quiet. But so many of us have been trained. And so what happens is we then get in this nervous system activation of like, oh, I need to just do that one thing. Let me check, let me write that email, let me do that thing. And then we get upregulated and we get stuck in like a shame loop spiral potentially, or that activated state. So I probably spent 90% of my time in that fight or flight. Like that's where my home was, which is, it made me really good at my job. I went from junior producer to executive producer, I think in like 5 years, unheard of. So, I was always so deeply rewarded. And I think so many of the high achievers, the women that are wanting that career, wanting it, keep doing and going. But what we also need to learn is that speed isn't everything. We really need that slowness and just that quiet time to let ourselves feel nourished and do nothing. And we have to train ourselves. We actually have to retrain ourselves to just be comfortable with quiet. And the way into that I would recommend for people is quiet mornings. Just let your mornings, don't be like, I need to go to the gym. I need to get started. Don't look at your phone. Literally, you can set a second alarm. You can have your first alarm for when you wake up. Ideally, you won't have it on your phone, have it on something else. And then you can even have a second alarm to be like, okay, 30 minutes. Just start with 30 minutes of just genuine quiet time. Just sitting with yourself, coming into vision if it feels good. Or I sit out on my back patio and just listen to the birds with my coffee. And it is my favorite time. But just starting with that space to just slow and create quiet and it's going to be uncomfortable in the beginning, everybody. It's going to be really uncomfortable. But the more that you can just start to sit through that discomfort, it's going to reward you so deeply.
And the other tip that I want to throw in there is also watching your information diet, because we all know, we've all heard by now how the amount of information that we take in a single day even outweighs what I think like ancestors took in a whole lifetime. And we know that. And it's like, okay, well, how do we actually counter that? And I'm so thankful for tools like Brick. How do you know about Brick? The phone, yeah, it's so good. Or even like putting your phone on airplane mode, not playing a podcast while you're cooking and walking and working and, not even playing music sometimes. And just allowing that silence and that spaciousness into, yes, your mornings, but also throughout your day. I know I can get into a zone. I'm a 5-1 in human design. I think my 1 is just always like wanting to learn. And I can find myself in seasons of, just listening to audiobook after audiobook, podcast after podcast, talking to friends. And I still struggle with, when I'm in those seasons, putting down that content and allowing myself to be in the space of life. But I find when I'm in those seasons of taking in a lot of information, my mind is working on overdrive. And what is that doing? Just like you said earlier, it's taking me out of the experience of my body. It's taking me out of the present, putting me into concepts and ideas and fears and worries and all of this. And so I just want to point that one out for everyone, because obviously it's going to be relatable. And yeah.
Well, just as we, talked about earlier, like our bodies, we may not have been recording at this point, but like our bodies are constantly sourcing for signals of safety or, threat. And guess what? It's doing that while we're on Instagram. It's doing that while we're just scrolling. With each face, with each thing, something else is happening in our body. Is this safe for me? It's this internal, unknown, subconscious dialogue that's happening. And so you're receiving the energy from all of these things. And so we really should be curating what we're receiving in these ways. And so it's so essential that we take these times to just kind of slow down. And I really, coming back into vision as well, if we can take that time to come into vision in the mornings, during those quiet mornings, sit for 10 minutes and my question is always, what do I want to create today? I get to step into my creator. I know my long-term vision and goal, but what is it that I want to create? And, usually it's joy, play, and curiosity. But like, if there's something I have to do, if I have to go to the grocery store, how can I do that? Enjoy, play, and curiosity. How can I, if I need to create a course, sit and do that so that is what I get to, how I get to show up, rather than most of us are just receiving and things are just happening to us. We're just allowing the world to happen to us. But when we come into that vision each day, we're starting our day from a point actually of choice. Okay, there's these things I might maybe have to do, but how I show up in them is now that choice. And so I get to be playful. I will literally dance in the grocery store and like skip along with myself, or think of like, ooh, I want to make this really delicious meal tonight. And then that I'm going to maybe turn on some music and really enjoy that. And, so it's like I now get to create and choose into what my day is from this place of groundedness, from this place of openness, from this place of quiet where things aren't coming at me, giving me their energy, of where I get to now choose the world I create. And that's really the practice.
I also want to name on the point of play specifically that in my experience, I can cognitively know I want to incorporate more play into my life as a whole, into just like my being. Like I need more play. And I've found that it's through working with my body, with my nervous system, that I don't have to think about play and how to incorporate it. I just become more playful and silly. And yeah, I call it silly goose mode.
Mine's like my nymph mode. She's like super silly, but play is only available to us when we're in that ventral vagal state. It's only available to us when we are in safety and connection. Otherwise, we can't. So working on our nervous systems brings in the joy. It makes it available for us. Otherwise, we are biologically incapable of that because we feel unsafe. We're running from a threat. Our brain is actually offline, or we are in collapse or freeze. So we can't connect. It's hard for us to connect with others from those states. So play, of course, the more you work on your nervous system, the more playful you get to be because you feel safer. You are now able to connect with others. So yeah, you want more joy, understand your nervous system.
And might I add, listen to what your nervous system tells you. Because I feel like this is like the masterclass I just got of like, yes, work with your nervous system, but that's not going to be enough to create that inner safety and stability and to be able to have the capacity for vision if you are in dynamics or environments that are inherently not supporting your safety or like, not creating a sense of safety in your system. And that's where that attunement to our nervous system can end up being a signal to us of where we might need to take some aligned action and shift some of those environments and dynamics to create that safety for ourselves. And that's where I think the boundaries come into play that we were speaking to earlier.
I had a teacher, her name is London Angel Winters, and she beautifully described this for me, and I teach it in my course, which is, when I was single, I got severe anxiety around dating. So much anxiety. And London's a relationship coach, and she does sexual polarity and embodiment as well. And I told her, like, I was newly single again after a 3-year relationship, and I was just like, I have so much anxiety about going out into the world and dating. And she said, well, women are like a flower. And she goes, everyone, when you're single, you're waiting for someone to pick you, right? And she goes, but most women are waiting also for the love to come before they actually bloom open. And she goes, the thing is we have to bloom in order for someone to want to come and look at the flower. But for so many women, I'm going to name, that's really scary. When we are in our like luscious feminine, we get a lot of attention. And so she said, the first thing that you have to do is build a fence. And she goes, but it's going to have a gate. And so you get to decide who comes in and who doesn't to marvel in the wonder of your garden. And that just always sung so true for me. And it was like, and so she was like, I am giving you permission if you're on a date to get, and you do not feel that it is right, you get up and you leave. She's like, do not sit through the thing, do not stay, because what I had to do to start to enjoy the date, I had to teach myself that I was safe with myself, that I wasn't going to fawn and stay through these situations and scenarios. And so that's where the boundary work. It is not to be hurtful. It is not to shame anyone. It is not to create walls. It is actually to help us bloom more so that we can grow and create the abundance that we need, and so that everyone can enjoy it if we want to let them in. And when we start to put up that fence, some people you might realize in your life are no longer allowed in, or they don't like how you're showing up now, because now, like, they're like, oh wait, I don't get to just like trample the garden and pick all the flowers I want, when they're used to doing that. And so when you go through this time of building boundaries and starting to name them, there can be rupture with people because you're showing up differently and they're used to a certain dynamic. So there can be a lot of grief that then comes with transformation, because you can lose friendships, you can lose jobs, you can lose family members. But, I say this, I feel I've been so blessed in that the more and more that I bloom, the more and more that I show people in my life who I am authentically, the more they've met me. And I wasn't expecting that.
That's so sweet. That doesn't always happen.
It doesn't. And I feel really blessed in that I've been surrounded by people in my life that just want to celebrate me for me. But the story I had told myself was that they wouldn't understand, or they would judge me, or they would push me away. And yeah, there's probably been a couple people, that have dropped out where it's just like, okay, we can't meet in this space anymore. And like, I love you and I wish you all the joy in the world, but we don't necessarily speak the same language anymore. But there's also just been, I get to show up as me, and there's so much beauty in that. And I feel like I just get to continue to bloom and grow.
Tell me what your experience of this is, but I find that being myself, and like this podcast is such a mirror to it, it is such a layered process. Like, I think I'm being myself. I feel like I'm being myself. And like, again, the podcast being a mirror is like every single episode, I feel like I notice more layers shedding that I didn't even know that I had. And I think that's where the analogy of the flower blooming resonates a lot. But I'm curious for you, firstly, if you find that this process of being more you is a layered process.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I also have an open identity center in my human design. So like which was actually someone recently explained all of human design for me. And I really I kind of knew it, but now someone really defined these things for me. I'm not meant to just be one thing. And like, that was such a liberating moment that like, oh, well, I should have I should niche down and I should help these types of clients and I should do this. And, but wait, I love feminine leadership and like this, and this feels really passionate. But I also really love, these massive transformations and the feminine work and really bringing that in. And it's like, I get to have all of it. And the day that I stop changing and letting layers go and trying things on is the day I die. We don't have to fit in a box. There isn't a limit to who we get to be. I mean, I think that's the beauty of the feminine. I love doing archetype work also with my clients, because that's how I found my nymphy energy, was through an archetype practice in one of John's programs. And it was like again, play. Oh my God, I get to like play and run around and she's silly and I just can feel this vibration flow through my body. And so I get to try her on. And then I get to try on my queen. And I could have, how many versions of a queen are there? Well, I could have a gilded crown. I could be dripping with jewels, or I could have a flower crown and be running through a field. So it's like even within one archetype, there's a million different versions of her. And I want to play with all of them. They're available to me. And maybe the one that I've been playing, which is what I found through my work, is I had been playing the one in the gilded crown because that's what I thought the world wanted me to be. But I actually really want the flower crown. I want to be running through a field and be in connection with people, inviting them into this journey rather than sitting on a throne by myself.
Well, on that note, I'm curious, based on your career and being in your masculine for so long, how your work has changed and your relationship to your work has changed in unwinding some of those deeply ingrained masculine approaches to your work.
Every day, it's a practice of saying, I am enough, not based upon what I do, but based upon who I am. And I like who I am. I didn't like who I was when I was in production because my biology and my system actually didn't allow me to be in the connection that I wanted. And so it's, again, how you and I even mentioned before, it's like that masculine of like, this is my capacity and this trigger is a good time for me to train to push it. No, this trigger is a beautiful time for me to hold it. So that, what is safety for me? Okay. And now I can expand it because I just created safety for myself. And now I have a little bit more room. And so that is my practice. Do I have a million shoulds in my head? Yes. I look at, what I've accomplished, and I get to say I am working hard each day by what the standards of what I used to do. It's probably 15% right now. But I am in safety and connection with others. I have access to joy. And I think I'm learning to trust that the more I amplify that joy, the more I create that the more it's going to come back to me. Because I can't imagine it any other way. Because that's what I now get to attract in the world. Whereas before I was, and I can say that I have manifested that, right? I have brought that into my life. I have a really beautiful partnership right now, and we continue to grow and expand and build. We're moving in together in the next 5 days, and that's really exciting. And I have some incredible clients that I just love and adore. And I'm leading this program that I just get lit up. I leave my work lit up. A week ago I had a client and she opened her eyes and she looked at me, she goes, "Oh my gosh, you're glowing." And I was like, that's because I love watching you transform in front of me. I don't think I ever came out of a production being like someone going, "Oh my gosh, you're glowing." I came home, I was sick every single time. I was exhausted and then needed 2 weeks in a quiet room with no interaction. So I've had to go through a lot and make choices, but my North Star that I follow right now is how can I be in my abundant feminine life force energy? How can I continue to cultivate that for myself? And also, right now, my practice is to bring in my grounded masculine because I didn't have that before. So bringing both of those in is really, and that's my, everything else is a no.
I find that it's also, I mean, as you put it, like it's a daily practice with bringing the inner feminine and masculine into harmony because some days might require more of the masculine or some days some circumstances might require more of the masculine or some days and circumstances more of the feminine. And yeah, I wonder, I doubt because that's just the nature of the polarity, right? It's always ebbing and flowing of like there isn't like a point where you necessarily reach a baseline of being integrated or balanced, that it is just that constant ebb and flow and checking in like in the morning to say, what do I want to create today?
I would say it's even John had said this, it's a moment to moment practice. So it's not just a once a day practice, and it's like, and that's where I find like, meditation is beautiful, but meditation is, at least the way that I learned mindfulness based stress reduction meditation was like, it's just a thought, let it go. It's just a thought, let it go, and you practice that twice a day and then you go into your day and you're like, you're in the chaos. Now you can kind of notice, but what do you do then? And that's what I love about somatic work is it's like, how do I feel right now? Oh, what do I need to take care of myself to feel the way that I want to? It's actually about, I have choice. Moment to moment, I have choice. And when I find myself locked down, or shut down, I can recognize it when I come back into my body and it's like, okay, well, start right now. And then, okay, wait, this feels really hard. Okay, what do I need to maybe not even resist it, but to feel it? Again, not resisting, making ourselves safe within our window of tolerance, not trying to push it down. Somatics is about really touching the things, holding the things, not trying to change it, but being with what is. Because an emotion or a feeling usually only lasts 90 seconds unless we clamp onto it. So when we notice that something's going on and then we start to just like, oh, there's this thing, what needs to flow through, we can do that. And so I love that I work with all my clients. It is a moment to moment practice. It's not just a morning. It's not just an evening. It is each moment is a chance to start anew and have new choice. And right now. So it's like, that is a difference to me because that's what presencing myself, coming back is what allows that to happen.
Yeah. And that's where the like baseline skill of attunement to self comes into play, where you can notice when you are oscillating or hitting your edges, as you put it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, wait, I'm at an edge. What do I need to feel safe again? Again, do I need to say, get up and leave? I mean, the first time I got up and left from a date, I went skipping down the street. I turned the corner and air punch. I was so proud of myself. It took me 35 minutes to get up the courage to actually do it. And I knew within 5 minutes of sitting down that this was not the right person, the right or anything for me. And the first time that I gave myself that permission, it was such a relief. It was such a relief. And it made dating joyful again for me because you know what? Now I wasn't going to sit through something that was painful. I wasn't going to spend 3 hours on a date when they order another drink and do the thing. Like, thank you so much. This has been, I appreciate you coming out, but I just don't think this is the right fit. So I'm going to leave and give you back your time. And guess what? Most of the time they said thank you.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't have to be cruel. It's not like me, you know, it's like I'm seeing the human in front of me, and I get to now take care of the human that's here.
Yeah. And that ends up taking care of other people. I sense that in the future, I will be texting you at some point. Cat, I just left a date in the middle of it. We're at the start of it.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that language. That was going to be a question I have for you because I cannot imagine. Before this conversation, I couldn't imagine. It didn't even cross my mind that that's something that I could do.
It hadn't for me either until London gave me that permission. But that was the very first step in me starting to understand what a gift boundaries were and that I had to start to use my voice. So even it's like the same thing can be done in a massage, right? How many of us, anybody else sit through a massage being like, oh, can you just stay there like a little bit longer? Can you have like, ooh, that's too hard. And you don't say anything until they actually ask you.
Or a haircut. I've had that. My hair was getting botched in front of my eyes and I was like, I'm pretty sure this is not going the way I want it to. Lo and behold, I just had my 4th haircut, evening it out. Like, yeah.
We get to take care of ourselves. No one else is going to take care of us except for us. And so no one can read our minds. So we have to learn to use our voice. And when we are in that fight or flight state, it can be very hard to use our voices, especially if we go into freeze. And so that is the practice. And practicing non-self-judgment. There's a reason why sometimes we're in a triggered state and then we leave a meeting or something. We're like, why couldn't I have said this thing? Well, we biologically couldn't. And so our brains couldn't say that. We couldn't say it. We were protecting ourselves. And so we have to start to just like even practice using our voice. And so sometimes it's in like safe, maybe you even need to set up at the beginning of the date, you need to create a container for it to be like, hey, here's how I would like a date to run. We check in at 5 minutes. We check in at 20 minutes. We check in, and we both get to see if we want to stay. And say it out loud before you even go. So it's not a scary thing to be like, I had a need to, before dating, get on a phone call with someone so I could see if we could have conversation. Because if we couldn't have conversation on the phone, then we couldn't have, then why am I getting on the subway, getting dressed up, doing all the things, and then to only get there and realize that you couldn't actually maintain eye contact, or we had not, you weren't funny, or, so it's like, okay, great. This is step one. And then at least when I went on the date, I was excited because at least I knew that we could have a conversation. I made so many friends that way. And now guess what? One of my best friends is dating one of those guys I met on a date, and we stayed friends because we had such a good time. I was like, you're a great human. I have deep respect for you. But I got to say at the end of the date, you're a delightful human. I'm not feeling a physical attraction though. But it took a couple years of starting to flex that to take care of myself. It's so important, I think, for women to just really, in these micro moments, start to use your voice to protect yourself, so that it's creating that safety, and expanding that windows for when we are in those bigger moments, we now have that capacity to actually do it.
Okay, I want to take a step back from the point of using your voice, because that is how we express our boundaries to other people, of course, and that can put us in our sovereignty in the life that we're creating for ourselves and the experiences that we're having. But before there's using our voice, there's trusting our inner voice. I was actually just talking to a gal in my breathwork program about this yesterday. I've noticed, because of how self-aware I am, Not that I'm aware of everything about myself, I'm finding, but like we can't be. And thank goodness for community and coaches like you that like help us see our blind spots. But I found that with the awareness that I have of different patterns, I can find myself actually gaslighting myself or gaslighting my intuition, because the story that comes up is, oh, I have this pattern of, let's say in dating context, I have this pattern of just like not dating or weeding people out before I even go on a date with them, just like going off of my intuition, which I think is like truly my intuition, and just saying no. And so sometimes I'll enter a season of telling myself, okay, if this is this is a pattern, let me do something different and let me give this person a chance, even though my intuition did tell me that there's something off here. And so in that, I've come to view that voice or hear that voice almost as like a sense of gaslighting my intuition. And I think that can stem from being in a chronic fawn response of telling ourselves from childhood all the way through to the adulthood into the workplace of quieting, suppressing that voice. And so I'm curious how you even like would recommend like untangling that kind of disharmony within oneself.
So I would recommend in like that moment, what would make me a yes? So what would make me a yes to this? There's something telling me, do I need more data points? Do I need more information? Great. Would a phone call feel better? Would actually, you know what? The dating apps really aren't feeling good to me. What are the experiences that I'm loving that are a yes to me that I can keep actually instead going out and build my life force? So giving the nutrients to the soil so that the flower gets to grow, and maybe then meeting more aligned people through that. And maybe even if I'm just meeting women, maybe they've got a single friend, so it's like, it's not even like, I think trusting ourselves, because what I heard you say, Saara, was a should in there, right? I should do this or I should do that. And so that's actually like, once should behavior comes in, it's like, well, no. I try to get like slow and calm. And sometimes I've been deeply working on cultivating like my highest self. And so when I can go, okay, well, what would my highest self do here? What is the most loving thing that my highest self would say? And sometimes it's been like, I love you, get your butt up, and you're going to go do this thing because you've been staying in a lot, and you actually like, an object in motion stays in motion. So it's actually going to be helpful for you to go out and be in a social atmosphere because you've stayed in for 2 weeks, or it is like, no, you've been going a lot. Please take care of yourself. And the only response, I love saying this to people and teaching this to people, thank you for taking care of yourself.
I love when you say that.
Yeah. Like if someone's like, I need to pause, I'm like, great. Thank you so much for taking care of yourself. Because we've just been, it's like, sorry, how many times? No, thank you for taking care of yourself. It's almost like, how can you say that to yourself in those moments? Because that's, again, building that window.
And it reminds me too of going back to the point that you shared from your learnings with John Wineland of checking in moment to moment. And yeah, I think there's an element too of maybe trusting, like you said, trusting that sometimes we need more data, and that means experimentation, and also recognizing that when we have more data, using our mind in like a healthy way to have discernment, or even I think tapping into our body to like have some discernment of when something is not feeling aligned or is feeling aligned.
I would also like notice if you're triggered and don't make a decision necessarily like because then probably our highest self isn't online, right? We can't connect with others. So that decision, so like how can we come back and we get to love on those spaces as well, not shame those spaces, because again, they've been taking care of us. They kept us safe. They've kept us alive. So how do we continually check in And how do we come back to that centered self? So again, having that system understanding is so essential, because it's like, should I be making decisions right now? No, maybe I need to sleep on it and find it when I'm in a more neutral state. And so that I can start to learn to trust myself, because that's a muscle. You know, I loved Louise Hay, who was a psychologist, I think from the 80s and 90s. You know, she kind of told this story that there's an office. She imagined that there's like an office in your body of all these little workers going around, and every time you have a thought, a piece of paper comes down, and the workers are like, okay, they file it away in the appropriate stack. And so when we start to build up a new muscle, a new thought, a new way, a new trust, it's a new pile. And they're like, wait, what do we do with this? We don't have any of these. And we've got a million of these. And we have none of these. And so we have to start to build that trust again, so that the stack gets a little bit bigger. And everyone wants an immediate thing. And it's not. It's just like it's death by 1,000 cuts, it is growth by 1,000 thoughts. And so we have to just, one by one, a single thought, and it's available to us right now, and right now, and right now, if we're aware enough to choose into it.
And that's also, I think, a symbol for just neural pathways, right? It's like having the neural pathways that have been forged for 20 plus years versus the one that we're intentionally, consciously trying to establish and reinforce now, through both our thoughts and our actions. I found like action to be valuable and like actually integrating the thoughts and beliefs that I've been cultivating over years. So,
and the perfectionist side of like, this overachiever perfectionist side that so many women have, where there's this really deep fear of failure, that is like one of the scariest things, to try something new, to potentially fail. At least that's always been for me, like this massive deep fear of failure. And learning to understand that I am lovable even when I quote unquote fail, and I am lovable when I do nothing. I am lovable when I slow down. Those have been some of the most essential shifts for me.
I feel like that's the unconditional love of the feminine, isn't it? An unconditional love for self. Yeah. Okay, we're nearing the end of our time. And before we go into my closing question, I do want to just ask if you lost every single tool and practice, you could only have one that you used yourself every single day, what would it be?
It would definitely be a feminine practice. I have a feminine practice that I still go back to. And I've probably done this one guided practice over 100 times, and every single time it is brand new. And when I say feminine practice, it's really all it is it's a playlist of songs that all have very different energies, and they build and then they come down. But in that, I let whatever wants to flow. And it's the gift of the feminine to just allow whatever needs to come. And so hands down, the one practice that I would do is that.
I love that. I am working on that right now, even just with like doing sensual yoga. I usually like to watch videos and follow the instructor. And one of my therapist coaches was telling me, she was like, I'm going to challenge you. Just try it without the video. See what comes through. And it's challenging because my mind like meets its edges, but that is the work. And I think that's its own version of expanding like window of tolerance to feel into what wants to move through me in a given moment.
Yeah. And I would say I use my guided ones because I can't guide myself. So I would also just invite in there, like, yeah, try it. But there's zero judgment on, again, I think that's like the gold star overachiever. I get lost. I can't coach myself. I can't, I have my own things. And so having someone hold the container and invite in other things that I wouldn't have thought of is what opens me up and allows me to go to that deeper spaces versus holding it on my own. Now, the difference there is learning to source it on your own without needing that, right? So those things that come up is now like, oh, but that's what the practice is, right? Ooh, I felt that in this. Because once we feel something, we can't unfeel it. Our body now knows and holds this wisdom. And so I now have that felt experience of what that really is. And I get to now tap into it and come back to it. So I found my nymph. I get to tap into her. And when I feel like really stuck or in something and like, I'm like, oh my God, why is this so hard? Can this be fun? Great. I now have my archetype or this texture that I've felt within me that I get to come back to. But I don't always have to hold it on my own.
I love that. It's coming back to, and this is a like mantra in the breathwork community I'm a part of like, take what you need. And like, again, come back to the moment. Like, what do you actually need in this day? Like, do you need to turn off your brain and you just need some guidance to, again, hold that container for you? Or yeah, like, do you have the capacity to flow and to meet your edges, because it is going to change day to day?
Yeah. Or am I really resistant right now? And great. Maybe how can I actually amplify that resistance? Can I play into that resistance? Can I like just throw a freaking sacred tantrum and let out the fact that I am deeply resistant right now and just be with what actually is, rather than have we don't have to have a story to everything. We don't have to add a story to it. It can just be what it is. And when you let that flow, then, oh, wait, it's gone in 90 seconds. Fantastic.
Yeah. All right. Last question of the day. What makes life feel rich nowadays?
What makes life feel rich nowadays is really, it's dancing and playing and curiosity.
Love it. And I have a feeling you're doing all of that often.
I have to. And when I'm in a bad mood, my partner reminds me, let's go dance.
Love that so much. Well, thank you for being on. This has been so fun.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been really fun. And I'm sorry that I'm long-winded. I ramble.
No, you've been great. I think there's just so much wisdom, like no apologies needed. That's the point of the show, is you have so much wisdom, embodied wisdom, and having the space to free flow and share from that place is so valuable for me in having this conversation with you, and I'm sure for listeners. So you are welcome exactly as you are. So
thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This was such a delight. I know we've been building towards it, so I'm really glad.
I know. And now it's happened. So thank you again. And to everyone listening, I'll see you in the next one next week. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to Rich Souls. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, I would love to hear what one key takeaway is that you got from it in the comments, wherever you're listening to this. If you have any topics or guests that you'd like to see on, feel free to shoot them my way, either in the comment or you can reach out to me on Instagram. And lastly, it would mean so much to me if you were to take just a couple of seconds and rate this podcast. Thank you. See you in the next one.